my name's Mark and I'm a musician based in the UK. I make ambient and electronic music using all sorts of gear. So for the last 3 years, I've been on a bit of a journey to move away from a laptop-based music setup, just using Ableton Live on my MacBook, towards a broader, more hands-on approach using different types of music hardware. I've bought and tried some different synths, drum machines and electroacoustic instruments, and in this video I'm going to tell you what I bought, how it worked for me and why I sold or kept and what I learned from that process. So hopefully my experiences will be of use to you if you're planning to do a similar thing. You can check out my music and field recordings on Bandcamp or via the streaming services. Check the links down in the description. So just over 3 years ago, I decided to try and move away from the laptop only setup that I'd been using to make music for a few years. I was using Ableton Live and it had worked pretty well for me. It was very convenient in that I was working on my laptop, and so I always had my laptop with me. If I had a bit of time to just fire up Ableton Live, plug in some headphones and start working on some music. I didn't need a studio space because everything's in the computer. And so anywhere, wherever I was, I could do a bit of music. I could save the point where I was at and come back and work on projects for longer periods of time. It's a very convenient approach. I'd managed to get into a good routine of working this way and finishing tracks and uploading them to SoundCloud, and there's a really nice community on SoundCloud, and so I was getting some good feedback and it was working pretty well for me. After a few years of working this way, I started to feel somewhat constrained and a little bit bored by the minimal setup, and I wanted to explore some other options. I wanted to move away from the input of the computer, just a trackpad and a keyboard. I wanted to explore some other things, hands-on, synth, other interfaces on hardware, to move away from the rigid approach of sequencing where you put in every note, to a looser, more hands-on, live, improvised type of approach to making music. I did have a budget, but only a small budget. So it had to be pretty cheap gear and pretty good value. I've used a lot of gear in the past, rack mount synths and samplers and all sorts of computers to make music. It was a long time ago, and so I was pretty out of touch. It changed a lot in the 20 odd years since I'd bought things previously. So the first thing I had to do was research, watch a lot of videos, get up to speed. And so that's what I did. In January 2021, just over 3.5 years ago, that's when I started buying things. Let's see what I got first. The following opinions are just my own experiences of using these pieces of gear when I bought them. So they're not meant as reviews, they're just my personal experiences. We're all different. We all use different tools in different ways. So I don't mean to offend anyone if their favorite piece of gear is not my favorite piece of gear. They're just my experiences. So first off, I bought this, the Arturia Mini Brute 2S. Which, not to scale, which I felt would be a good, lots of knobs and buttons, patch bay, like a starter for maybe moving into modular. Sequencer built in, nice powerful synth, mono synth. I thought I could expand this out. This would be a good start. So this is the first thing that I bought. And it sounded really good. But coming from Ableton just into having this didn't work well for me. coming from the digital world where you could just save things and then come back to them exactly as they were, I found it quite hard to work with something where it was set up and you could get one sound out of it, or maybe a couple of sounds, and you had to leave it set up until you'd finished working on something. I just wasn't in the mindset to do that then. I think if I had it again now, I'd probably be able to get a lot more out of it. But as a first synth, it just wasn't right for me at the time. I'd only kept this for a couple of months and then I sold it. But it's a nice piece of gear, sounds nice, and it is a good thing to start a modular system. And on that note, at the same time, I also bought these guys, the Coma electronic field kits, and I thought maybe these two could work together, and they probably could have done, but this one left fairly quick. So I had these, and they're quite interesting pieces of gear. They do all sorts of things. You can link them together. They can make sound on their own, not much sound though. They're mainly processors for various things. And this is really like a little workshop where you've got a mixer and various ways to create triggers from all sorts of signals. They're very interesting things, and I actually kept them for quite a while. I think I'd hoped that I could do these two things together, but I know I probably could get more out of them now, but I really wasn't in the right mindset for working with these at the time, so they were a bit of a failure. That one went. These two I kept around for a couple of years, but in the end I was really not using them much at all, so I actually sold these as well. So these guys, good fun, had them for a couple of years, but now they've gone. So at the same time as well, the other thing that I bought early on in my first batch of purchases was the Electron model samples, and this is a drum machine. And again, I think I was trying to solve the problem of having something that was very hands-on with a lot of controls, but also here where the digital aspect of it means that you can work on things, save things, and then come back to them whenever you want. You can have multiple things on the go at any one time. And I did really like this. I kept it for 3 years. In fact, I've only sold it recently just because I wasn't using it much and I needed the money to buy other things. But this is a great piece of kit. Really good fun. Do all sorts of things on it. So I very much enjoyed having the Electron model samples, and I also ended up buying some more Electron gear later on. But I had this for 3 years, really enjoyed it. It was just a fun thing to play with in the evening, just to sit there and make beats on. After the first failures and some success, I decided to try a different approach. And I got myself a month later, this is the beginning of 2021 still, I bought myself an electric violin. So this is the Yamaha electric violin. It's a beautiful thing, really quite expensive as well, but it is a very beautiful instrument, quite strange in its design. I've played the violin since I was a kid. I've got, hold on. This is my violin that I've had since I was a kid. Played in lots of orchestras, so the violin is my main instrument, really. Can still play it now, and you know, I haven't played it much for years, but I can still play it. So I decided that maybe a good move was to get one of these, an electric violin, and maybe I could use that to do some more hands-on and a different type of music. I did keep this for quite a long time, about a year, but ultimately I didn't like the sound of it. When you're used to playing a real violin, which they are actually quite hard to get pickups on and to amplify, so I thought this would be a better way to do that, but I just didn't like the tone of it in the end. And people spend a lot of time trying to work on the tone of these things. Gave up eventually and decided to recycle the cash into some other things. I would like to try some other electric instruments. I'd like to try the Soma Divina, which is a electric stringed instrument. That looks quite interesting, but this one didn't work for me. So the Yamaha electric violin, off it went. So then I tried some different directions. First off, I got the Polyend tracker. So at this point, I've still got the field kits around, upside down. I've still got the field kits around. Haven't got the mini brute. Still got this, and I've still got that. And now into the mix comes the Polyend tracker. So I had these left. So only that one's gone when this one comes along. Maybe I should have done it like that. Anyway, so messing about with those. They don't really work with anything else, so they're kind of over there. This is fairly standalone. The main issue with this is that it doesn't do overbridge like some of the other Electron gear. You can use it on its own and record out of the stereo outs, but it's actually quite tricky to multi-track. I did try to multi-track it by recording out each track separately, but it is a bit of a pain. I thought I'd give this a go because it was similar to this, but also I think it just felt like it would give me a lot of different options because it had effects in the box and it had a really powerful tracker-based sequencer, but I just did not like it at all. I did like this one, but I didn't like this. I didn't like the tracker. It's a great piece of gear, lots of people like it, but it just didn't work for me. I think it's too much like a computer, and I just don't get on with the tracker interface at all. So this was just kind of a big fail, and so that didn't last for long in the studio. That went quite quick. And I also got this guy just for a bit of fun. Sit down on the sofa in the evening, see if I could make some beats out of this. A lot of people like these, and I thought, well, these are quite cheap, so if I get one, then and I like it, then I can get a whole load of them. You know, you see people stringing them together, but I didn't like it. So these guys, I did not keep those for long, and they just didn't work out for me. At the same time, though, I bought something else that did work out for me. The Arturia Micro Freak, and this is brilliant. It's hard to know why things work for you and why some things don't, but this, it maybe solves the problem of this because it's got a huge amount of different sounds in it. It's got a lot of controls still, so it is quite playable. This matrix is maybe a bit fiddly to use, but it also has the advantage of being digital, so you can save loads of presets. You can come back to them, work on them in a way that you couldn't do with this. And it has some analog elements. There is an analog filter in it, as long as you're using it as a monosynth and not in the paraphonic mode, then you do get an analog filter. But to be honest, I don't really notice a difference. And they've added so much to this over time that this is an excellent piece of kit, especially as your first synth. So this I've used on a lot of recordings. It's a brilliant little synth. It's a lot of fun to design patches on, and I think this will always be staying in the studio. So in a way, even though I kept some of these things for quite a long time, this is the first real success at buying something that's not a computer that I've kept. Next up, about a year later, this is in middle of 2022, so about 18 months into my musical hardware journey, I bought the Electron Digitact. It's another drum machine, but they're more than drum machines, these things. This can have multiple tracks, and I think I was trying to move up from this, where I could multi-track, still a lot of hands-on controls, not as many as this, and in some ways not as fun to play as this. This is great fun to play, but this one has overbridge, so you can multi-track this out, record all the tracks separately, and overbridge is really good. It took a while to get used to, but I did get used to it. But I didn't keep it for long because it's almost like I needed a combination of these two. Like the overbridge, if you only could have this multi-tracked with overbridge, but that doesn't exist currently in the Electron world. I do like the Electron gear. The sequencers are great fun, but ultimately I had so little money that I decided to sell both of these eventually. I wouldn't get this again, although it was really good fun. And if you haven't got a lot of money and you just want something to mess about with, a drum machine, this is a great drum machine, really good. So at this point, where are we? I then bought my guitar. So Yamaha Pacifica, it's over there, I'll put a photo in. I think this had failed as a electroacoustic instrument. And so I felt that maybe an electric guitar would work, and I bought the Yamaha Pacifica, and I still have the Yamaha Pacifica. So that has worked, and that has been the basis of a lot of my music, the electric guitar, quite interestingly. So yeah, so we're at the end of 2022, and all I have left is these. I have those left, plus my microphone. So end of 2022, this is what I've got left. Everything else sold, plus my electric guitar. And I went to Synthfest in Sheffield, which is organised by Sound on Sound, and the manufacturers, there's a lot of manufacturers there showing off all their gear. It's a bit like a small super booth, a one-day small super booth. So I was there in 2022. And I was looking, there was a few things I wanted to try, but the one thing that I wanted to try was, so this is the Soma Pulsar 23, which is it's a drum machine, but it's capable of a lot more than that. And it's a lot of fun to play with. And you get 4 tracks, 4 sounds, and there's all these, you can do a lot with this. It's kind of modular. But it's its own thing as well. You can connect it with other gear because you can get all sorts of CV ins and outs. So you can fix it up with some modular gear. But I played with one of these at Synthfest and it was really good fun. So I bought one. these are quite expensive. I did enjoy having it, but I decided that it was too much for me to spend. At the time, I didn't have enough money really, so it was a bit of an impulse buy, and I used it for a few weeks and I did quite a bit of work with it and I enjoyed using it, but I sent it back because it was too expensive. I sold these a few months later, and I just had the Electron model samples left, so everything's gone except this and this. Sometimes I'll just record jams on it completely on its own and then add things in Ableton afterwards. So fairly recently I sold this guy just a few months ago because I wanted the money to put into other things, and I wasn't using it that much, so it had to be recycled. And so this is the only thing that I have left, plus my guitar, and I now have a modular system as well. This is my modular synth. It's an 84 HP 6U Eurorack system, which was built for me by my good friend Tony so that I could dip my toes into the modular world, which a friend of mine has built for me. So I make music now with this, my guitar and my modular system. So that's what I have left. So it's hard to sum up like the journey maybe, but I suppose what I've learned is that it's good to try out lots of different gear because you don't really know what would work. But there's a very particular balance of different things I think that work for different people. The main thing that I'm looking to expand now is really creative pedals. Like I use the hologram microcosm. Within the systems that I have, the modular and the guitar, I would look to expand my creative pedals. So that is an overview of the gear that I've bought, the gear I've sold, and the gear I've kept. I hope that was some use. So ultimately this process has worked well for me, and I'm now making music in a totally different way than I was before. I tried a lot of different approaches and I learned a lot about what works for me and what doesn't work for me. And of course that will be different for everyone. But I now mainly work with my guitar, the Arturia Microfreak, and my modular system, and I work in a much more live and performative way. Ableton Live is still a big part of my process, but now it's later on in the process. I use it as a multi-track recorder, and then I'll use it to add extra elements into those tracks and do a lot of processing and producing with the live recordings. So yeah, that's how I work at the moment. I hope you found this of use, and I'll see you in the next one.